Markets are usually busy, noisy places. People shopping, vendors shouting prices, money changing hands. But if you've ever stayed after closing or arrived before sunrise, you know they feel completely different. In this video, you'll hear 3 scary horror stories from market vendors, people who were just doing their job when something strange started happening around them. If you enjoy real-style horror stories like this, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's get into the first story.
You know that specific smell old electronics have? That mix of ozone, heated plastic, and stale dust? Most people hate it, but to me, it smells like money. I've been a picker for the better part of a decade. I spend my weekends crawling through flea markets, estate sales, and swap meets, looking for things that people have undervalued. I buy low, list it on eBay, and pocket the difference. It's not a glamorous life, but it pays the rent, and honestly, the thrill of the hunt is addictive. You never know when you're going to find a first edition comic book buried in a stack of old newspapers or a silver watch tossed in a bin of costume jewelry. But that addiction is gone now. I haven't stepped foot in a market for 6 months. Not since I met the estate specialist. It was a Sunday morning at the Tri-County swap meet. This place is huge. A sprawling grid of asphalt, jam-packed with vendors selling everything from rusted lawnmowers to tube socks. I usually get there right at dawn, before the casual shoppers show up, so I can snag the best deals. I was doing my usual loop, scanning tables with a practiced eye, when I saw a stall I'd never noticed before. It was way in the back, near the perimeter fence where the gravel turns to weeds. The setup was weirdly professional for that section. The table was draped in a heavy, black velvet cloth, and the merchandise wasn't just piled up. It was arranged. There were high-end watches, designer sunglasses, and smartphones lined up with military precision. Sitting behind the table was a man who looked like he belonged in a boardroom, not a flea market. He was wearing a crisp button-down shirt. His hair was gelled back, and he was reading a hardcover book. A small sign on the table read, "Rapid Estate Liquidations. Cash only." I walked up, intrigued. Usually, estate liquidation at a flea market means someone's grandma died and they're selling her porcelain cats. This was different. This was the good stuff. I picked up a laptop sitting on the corner of the table. It was a high-end gaming model, sleek, heavy, and looked brand new. "How much for the rig?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. You never want to look too eager. The man didn't even look up from his book. He just said, "300. My jaw nearly hit the pavement. That machine was worth $2,000 easy. I asked him if it worked, if there were any issues. He finally looked at me then. His eyes were incredibly pale, almost gray, and he gave me a smile that didn't reach them. He told me he handles rapid turnovers for estates where the family just wants everything gone immediately. No questions asked, no haggling. He said the battery was dead, but if I took it now, the price stood. If I walked away, the price went up. I didn't hesitate. I pulled $300 out of my pocket, handed it over, and took the laptop. I felt like I had just pulled off the heist of the century. I practically speed walked back to my car, terrified he would change his mind or realize he'd underpriced it. I drove home with the laptop on the passenger seat, my mind already calculating the profit margin. When I got to my apartment, I plugged it in. The charging light flickered orange, then steady green. I hit the power button. It booted up instantly, the fans whirring to life with a quiet hum. I expected a password screen. Most people lock their devices, but it went straight to the desktop. The background wallpaper was a photo of a young woman, maybe 25, laughing while holding a golden retriever puppy. It was a candid, happy shot. I felt a momentary pang of guilt, assuming this girl had died tragically young and I was now profiteering off her belongings. But business is business. I went to the settings to wipe the drive and reset it to factory defaults. That's standard procedure. You don't want the previous owner's data cluttering up the sale. But before I hit erase, curiosity got the better of me. The user folder was named Sarah. I opened the Documents folder, expecting to find homework or tax returns. Instead, I found a folder labeled Log. Inside were hundreds of text files, all dated. The dates went back 2 years. I opened one from a year ago. It was just a list of times and locations. 8 a.m., Starbucks on 4th. 8:45 a.m., gym. 6 p.m., home. It looked like a stalker's diary. I felt a chill run down my spine. I closed it and opened the folder labeled Photos. These weren't photos Sarah had taken. These were photos taken of her. Telephoto lens shots. Sarah walking to her car. Sarah eating lunch alone. Sarah through the window of her apartment at night. My stomach turned. This wasn't Sarah's computer. This computer belonged to the person who was watching her. I looked at the date on the most recent photo. It was dated yesterday. The vendor said he did estate liquidations. That implies the owner is dead. A horrific realization started to dawn on me. I wasn't buying a dead woman's laptop. I was buying the equipment of a predator who had finished his hunt. I frantically searched the computer for a name, an address, anything I could give to the police. I found a folder hidden deep in the system directory labeled Trophy. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the mouse. I didn't want to see what was in there. I really didn't. But I clicked it. It wasn't gore. It was worse. It was a video file, time-stamped from early this morning, around 3 a.m. I hit play. The video was dark, shot with night vision. It showed the interior of a bedroom. I recognized the layout from the background of the puppy photo. The camera moved silently toward the bed. Sarah was sleeping. The camera got closer, hovering inches from her face. You could hear the cameraman's breathing slow, steady, excited. Then a gloved hand came into frame and stroked her hair. She stirred, but didn't wake up. The whisper on the video was barely audible, but with the volume up, I heard it clearly. Liquidation complete. I slammed the laptop shut. I felt sick, physically ill. I grabbed my phone to dial 911. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely unlock the screen. As I was dialing, a sound came from the laptop. A ping. It was a notification sound. I froze. I hadn't connected the laptop to my Wi-Fi. I hadn't touched the network settings. But then I realized modern laptops often have cellular capabilities or auto-connect to open networks. I slowly opened the lid. A message window had popped up on the screen. It was an instant message app I didn't recognize. The message read, "I see you enjoyed the discount." I stared at the words, my breath caught in my throat. A second message appeared. "But you opened the trophy folder." That wasn't part of the deal. I stood up, knocking my chair backward. I looked around my room, suddenly feeling incredibly exposed. The webcam on the laptop, the little green light next to the lens was on. He was watching me. Right now. I slammed the lid shut again, grabbed the power cord, and yanked it out of the wall. I ran to my window and looked out at the street. A gray sedan was parked 2 houses down. It hadn't been there when I came home. The engine was idling. I didn't wait to see who was inside. I grabbed my keys and ran out the back door, jumping the fence into my neighbor's yard. I ran 3 blocks to a gas station and called the police from the clerk's phone. I told them everything. I told them about the vendor, the laptop, the girl named Sarah. When the police raided my apartment, the laptop was gone. My front door had been kicked in. The gray sedan was gone too. They eventually identified Sarah. She was missing. She had vanished from her apartment 2 days prior. They found her alive, thank God, 3 weeks later in a storage container 50 miles away. She was traumatized, but she survived. But the man? The estate specialist? They never found him. The flea market had no record of his registration. He was a ghost. I moved out of that apartment the next day. I couldn't sleep there anymore. I keep thinking about that sign on his table. Rapid estate liquidations. He wasn't selling things because people had died. He was selling their lives off, piece by piece, while he held them captive. And the worst part? Sometimes, when I'm browsing online classifieds, I see listings for high-end electronics, cash only, priced way too low. And I wonder how many other people have bought a trophy without realizing it. I wonder if they ever opened the hidden folders, or if they just wiped the drive, erasing the only evidence of a crime in progress. I used to think the local farmer's market was the safest place on earth. It's all strollers, golden retrievers, and overpriced kale. I've been a vendor there for 3 years, selling homemade jams and preserves. It's a tight-knit community. We all know each other, we trade goods at the end of the day, and we gossip about the customers. But there was one vendor who always kept to himself, and unfortunately, he was my direct neighbor. His name was Arthur, but everyone just called him the Pie Man. Arthur was a large man, barrel-chested with hands the size of shovels. He sold meat pies. And let me tell you, these weren't just standard frozen aisle garbage. These were gourmet, savory, heavy pies that smelled like heaven. The scent of rosemary, thyme, and slow-roasted meat would waft over into my stall all day long. It was maddening. Customers would line up 20 deep for his pies, ignoring my strawberry jam completely. Arthur was friendly in a surface-level way. He'd smile and say hello, but his eyes were always flat. He never talked about his life, his family, or where he sourced his meat. In the farmer's market world, sourcing is everything. You brag about your grass-fed beef or your free-range chickens. Arthur just said it was an old family trade secret. It was mid-July, and we were in the middle of a historic heat wave. It was 103 degrees on the asphalt. The air was thick and suffocating. By noon, most of the customers had fled to air-conditioned malls. It was just us vendors, sweating through our clothes, trying to keep our produce from wilting. Arthur had a large refrigerated van parked right behind our stalls. He kept his inventory in there, running back and forth to grab fresh pies. Around 1 p.m., Arthur's generator sputtered. It made a loud coughing noise, smoked a bit, and then died completely. The hum of his refrigeration unit cut out. Arthur went pale. I've never seen a big man look so terrified so quickly. He started frantically pulling the starter cord, cursing under his breath. He looked over at me, sweat dripping down his face. "I need to go get a part," he said, his voice tight. "Watch my stall. Do not let anyone near the van. The insulation is good. It'll hold the cold if the doors stay shut." Before I could even agree, he jumped in his pickup truck, which he kept separate from the van, and peeled out of the parking lot. So there I was, guarding the empire of meat pies. 10 minutes went by, then 20. The heat was relentless. I was fanning myself with a magazine when I heard a noise. It came from the van. It was a heavy thud, like something falling over. I figured a stack of pie crates had toppled, but then I heard it again. Thud, thud, and then a sound that made the hair on my arms stand up despite the heat. A low, muffled groan. I stood up and walked around to the back of the van. The vehicle was white, nondescript, no logo. I put my ear against the metal doors. Help. It was so faint I almost missed it. It wasn't a cry. It was a whimper. Please. My heart started hammering against my ribs. I looked around. The market was mostly empty. The other vendors were dozing off in the heat. I knew Arthur told me not to open the doors, but someone was trapped inside. Maybe a kid? Maybe he locked an assistant in there by accident? I tried the handle. Locked. But Arthur, in his panic, had left a set of keys sitting on his folding table next to the cash box. I grabbed them. My hands were slick with sweat. I fumbled with the lock, finally finding the right key. I turned it and swung the heavy door open. I expected to see shelves of frozen pies. I expected to see cardboard boxes. I did not expect the smell. It hit me like a physical blow, a wave of copper, old blood, and something sweet and rotting. The interior of the van was modified. The walls were lined with heavy plastic sheeting. Hanging from a rail on the ceiling were hooks. Meat hooks. And on those hooks were slabs of meat, but it wasn't beef. It wasn't pork. Huddled in the back corner, zip-tied to a metal ring on the floor, was a young man. He was naked, emaciated, and covered in filth. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a terror that I can't even describe. He was missing a foot. The wound was bandaged, but poorly. Fresh blood seeped through the gauze. I looked up at the slabs of meat hanging on the hooks again, the shape of a thigh, the curve of a rib cage. It wasn't livestock. It was him, and others like him. I couldn't breathe. The world spun. I realized in that second that the delicious smell of rosemary and thyme that I had been inhaling for 3 years, I knew exactly what it was covering up. The man on the floor tried to speak, but his voice was dry and cracked. "He's coming back," he rasped. "Run?" I didn't have to be told twice. I slammed the doors shut, not even bothering to lock them. I dropped the keys on the asphalt and I ran. I ran to the market manager's tent and screamed for them to call the police. I was hysterical. I was vomiting. They thought I had heat stroke. By the time the police arrived, Arthur was back. I watched from the back of a squad car as the officers approached the van. Arthur was standing there, calm as anything, talking to them. He opened the back doors for them. I waited for the officers to draw their guns. I waited for the horror. Instead, the officers looked inside, poked around for a minute, and then shrugged. They walked over to me. "Ma'am," the officer said, looking annoyed. "It's just pigs. He's transporting half a hog for a pig roast. There's no one in there." I screamed that they were lying. I told them about the man, the missing foot. They checked again. Nothing. Just standard butchered pork. Arthur looked at me with a look of mock concern. "The heat gets to people," he told the cops. "She's been acting strange all day." They let him go. They took me to the hospital for a psych evaluation. I lost my spot at the market. Everyone believed Arthur. But I know what I saw. And I know why the van was empty when the cops looked. Between the time I ran and the time the cops arrived, Arthur had 10 minutes. He has a chest freezer in that van. A big one. He just moved the inventory. A few weeks later, I saw a missing persons flyer on a telephone pole near my house. It was a hitchhiker who had vanished last month. It was the man in the van. I called the tip line. I gave them everything. I never heard back. Arthur moved on to a different market circuit a month later. He's still out there, and people are still lining up for his pies. The scariest part isn't even the murder. It's the fact that hundreds of people in my town have eaten human flesh and raved about the seasoning. If you ever see a stall selling Grandpa's secret recipe meat pies, just keep walking. Go buy the vegan jam. It might save your life. When you're a college student drowning in debt, you stop asking questions about where your paycheck comes from. That's how I ended up working security at the Metro Wholesale Terminal. It's this massive, cavernous indoor market in the industrial district. During the day, it's a chaotic mess of cheap clothing vendors, knockoff electronics, and bulk spices. At night, it's a concrete tomb. The job was simple: patrol the grid from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., punch the clock at the checkpoints, and make sure no homeless people broke in to sleep. The manager, a guy named Mr. Henderson, who always smelled like stale cigars and peppermint, gave me the tour on my first night. He was oddly specific about the rules. Don't use your phone on the floor. Don't listen to music. And most importantly, he stopped and pointed down a dark corridor. Never, ever disturb the tenant in stall 404. I looked down the aisle. Stall 404 was located in the dead zone, a section of the market where the overhead lights were blown out. It was a large corner unit with a heavy, roll-down steel shutter. Why? I asked. What do they sell? Henderson just glared at me. They pay for privacy. They pay a lot. You see that shutter down, you keep walking. You hear anything inside, you ignore it. It's just their machinery. Clear? I said yes. I needed the $12 an hour. For the first month, it was the easiest job in the world. I walked the empty aisles, listening to the hum of the vending machines and the settling of the building. But I couldn't stop thinking about stall 404. It was the only stall that didn't have a sign. No branding, no hours of operation. And every night, around 3 a.m., I'd hear a low, rhythmic thrumming sound coming from inside, like a heavy generator or a ventilation system running at full power. One Tuesday, around 2 a.m., a storm knocked out the power to the grid. The emergency lights kicked on, bathing the whole market in this sickly red glow. The hum from stall 404 stopped. The silence was heavy. I was doing my rounds, flashlight in hand, when I passed the dead zone. That's when I heard it. With the machinery off, the sound was distinct. It wasn't a machine. It was crying. It was faint, muffled, like it was coming from behind thick layers of insulation. But it was definitely a human voice. A child, maybe? Or a young woman? I froze. My instructions were clear. Keep walking. But I'm a human being. I couldn't just leave someone trapped in the dark. I approached the steel shutter. There was a small gap at the bottom where the concrete was uneven. I got down on my stomach and pressed my face to the cold floor, shining my flashlight through the crack. The beam cut through the darkness inside. It wasn't a shop. It looked like a hospital ward. I saw white tile floors, pristine and clean. I saw metal gurneys. And on those gurneys were people. They were strapped down, unconscious, hooked up to 4 drips. There were maybe 6 of them. And in the corner, sitting on the floor, was a girl. She was awake. She was the one crying. She looked right at the crack, right into my light. Her eyes were hollow, terrified. She mouthed one word, "Please." I scrambled back, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would explode. This wasn't a wholesale vendor. This was a holding pen, a storage facility for human beings. I fumbled for my radio to call the police, but then I remembered Henderson. They pay for privacy. Henderson knew. He was part of it. If I called it in on the radio, he'd hear me. I grabbed my cell phone, but I had no signal. The metal roof of the market blocked everything. I had to get outside. I started running toward the loading dock exit. As I turned the corner, I slammed right into a wall of muscle. It was the night janitor, a guy I'd waved to 100 times. But he wasn't holding a mop. He was holding a stun baton. "You were doing so well, kid," he said. his voice completely different, cold, professional. Curiosity is a dangerous thing. He swung the baton. I ducked, feeling the electricity crackle past my ear. I didn't try to fight him. I scrambled on all fours, slipping on the polished concrete, and sprinted back into the maze of clothing stalls. I could hear him behind me, heavy boots stomping, talking into a headset. Breach in Sector 4. Seal the exits. I heard the heavy clank of the magnetic locks engaging on the doors. I was trapped. I dove into a rack of cheap winter coats, burying myself under the pile of polyester. I held my breath. I could hear footsteps. Multiple people now. They were sweeping the aisles. "Find him," a voice said. It was Henderson. "We have a shipment moving in an hour. He goes in the container with the rest of them." I lay there for what felt like eternity. I knew I couldn't hide forever. They would check every stall. I needed a distraction. I remembered the fire alarm. The manual pull station was on a pillar near the food court, about 50 feet away. I waited until their footsteps moved to the next aisle. Then I bolted. I ran faster than I ever have in my life. I heard a shout, "There he is," followed by the pop of something that sounded like a suppressed gunshot. A bullet tore through a display of perfume bottles next to my head, shattering glass everywhere. I didn't stop. I reached the pillar and yanked the fire alarm lever down with all my weight. The siren screamed. The strobe lights flashed. And most importantly, the emergency failsafes disengaged the magnetic locks on the doors. I shoulder-checked the emergency exit and burst out into the cool night air. I didn't stop running until I reached the highway. I flagged down a trucker who let me use his radio to call the state troopers. By the time the police raided the Metro wholesale terminal, it was dawn. They cut open the shutter to stall 404. It was empty. Not just empty, it was gutted. The tile floor had been ripped up. The walls were bare concrete. No gurneys. No people. It smelled intensely of bleach. The girl, the unconscious bodies, they were gone. Henderson was there, acting confused and outraged, claiming I was a disgruntled employee who had a psychotic break. They found no evidence. No drugs, no trafficking ring. Just an empty room. I was fired, obviously. The police warned me about filing false reports. They think I hallucinated it. But I know what I saw. And I know that ship and Henderson talked about went somewhere. I work in landscaping now. I stay outside in the sun. I don't go into large buildings. But sometimes, when I'm in a crowd, I'll see a young woman who looks just like the girl in the stall. And I freeze. I wonder if she escaped, or if that's just someone else's daughter, walking around unaware that there are places in her city, hidden in plain sight, where people are bought and sold like discount merchandise. And stall 404? I checked online. It's listed as available for rent. God help whoever rents it next. And that's all for tonight. Remember, the most terrifying monsters are the ones that look just like us. The ones who might even live right next door. If these stories serve as a good reminder to trust your instincts, then show your support and like and subscribe. Hitting that bell means you'll get a warning before the next nightmare begins. Sleep well, if you can.